Hello and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy Podcast. My name is Jed, and today we are in the philosophical midwifery book, learning to understand the nature of our problems and also all human problems. So that's pretty neat. It's pretty neat to discover that our problems are understandable and solvable. Just fixing my little stuffy. I have a little stuffy here. He's a flamingo. Keeps me company while we stream. So our problems are understandable and solvable. So that's pretty neat because ain't no one else really saying that. And if they do, they're not saying it in convincing ways. They lack reason and evidence. Or, in effect, the logos. Now, logos is a little bit more than simply reason and evidence. Logos goes beyond our physical experience. It's the principle of intelligibility. So, this is what we read at the beginning of chapter 2. It's entirely possible for us to verify we live in an intelligible and caring universe. The fact that we do have intelligible patterns in our reality that govern our world and govern our souls speaks to an intelligence beyond the physical world. So what? Well, so if there is this sort of an intelligence, what sort of nature would it have? This is important because, let's fix some settings here, because we have to wonder why we have the problems we have. Does the fact that we have problems speak to an irrational universe or an uncaring universe? So, let me just fix something here. Let's make it. Okay, so what we are learning to do is understand the nature of our problems, which speaks to there being a cause of problems. Our question is that cause good or mean and nasty? Or, third option, neither. It's empty, it's pointless. Now, if there is an intelligence giving us intelligible principles, then we can cast out the idea that nihilism, nothing. There's nothing there. There is no intelligence. We know that can't be true. Just simple reason says that. Because we do notice that there are understandable patterns to whatever level that we are able to reflect and look for patterns, orders, symmetry, and establish that these patterns speak to principles that apply always. In other words, 1 and 1 will always equal 2. Gravity seems to work everywhere, but also the cause of human problems are universal. The nature of human problems are understandable. So it's a simple development of evolution, human beings gaining the intelligence to have language, gaining the intelligence for ousia, use that ousia to reflect on their experience, can share in or reawaken or remember that there are principles, and we can use those principles to predict things. And that's pretty much the story of human evolution. Agriculture, if I plant seeds here, then there's a pattern. Crops grow. That kind of thing. We don't just get crops because the gods are smiling upon us, that kind of thing. So what we are doing is taking the next step in human evolution and realizing the same principles that apply to everything also apply to us, apply to our souls. And this is the fundamental question of the book that we got in chapter 1. Why can we apply reason and reflection to understand principles and patterns and use those patterns to benefit in everything else except for ourselves? Why are we irrational and immature when it comes to human problems? And this was expressed when Pierre was fighting the Nazis, walking down a road in Rome, and Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and he said, oh, this is the same road that the Romans walked to defend against their invading barbarian hordes. In other words, we're not learning anything. We're repeating the exact same problems we have been repeating for thousands of years. Why are we so irrational and immature in our inability to reflect on our experience to establish the patterns and find the cause so we can be better? Why do we keep doing these terrible things? So this is the question that we got at the beginning of the book that we're carrying with us as we read. And this is where we are. We are at a point in the text where we have asked the question, well, hang on a second, what if our problems are unconscious? They're not marked by intelligence. Then we can question our whole system. So that's the question we are in the text. So, what we are discovering is this word intelligibility doesn't just mean evidence and reason. It has to include it. We're not making things up here. It has to actually work. You have to actually become happier and healthier and more able to reach your goals and all of these sorts of things. We should be able to test this, make a political party or make a society governed by the logos, giving us the freedom to spend our time reflecting on our pathologos, the cause of our problems, and using the freedom from our pathologos to develop our rationality, develop our growth, develop the logos. And it should work. It should work. But it's not simply whether or not it works in the physical world. It has to allow us to reach metaphysical goals. The intelligence that is creating and sustaining these principles, we want to wonder about what that is. Because while there are some people who dismiss the understandability of problems as impossible because there is no intelligence, I mean, that's a kind of pathologos. That's actually a very archetypal one. There is no reason or intelligence. We can clearly see how that belief would block one in the quest to discover the nature of reason and intelligence. If you don't even think there is such a thing, and you're convinced. Now, another way is saying, well, there is an intelligence that supersedes the physical world, but it's evil, the devil. Right, that's another kind of pathologos. The fact that we have problems and we have suffering because of these problems, because the fact that we do repeat our problems without learning shows us that there must be some evil force playing this sinister trick on us. Now, what we are doing in midwifery is realizing not only are our problems understandable and solvable, we can take the principles that we learn, the skills that we learn in solving our own problems, this ousia, reflection upon ourselves with the logos, with the dialectic, the principles of the logos. We can take this thing that we have been practicing to become free and apply it to itself. So not only do we become free individually, we can take those skills of ousia and reflect on midwifery itself. Hey, if this benefited me so much, let's wonder about that. Let's keep the game going. Let's keep the conversation rolling. If I benefited, maybe I can understand the system and benefit my friends, benefit my loved ones. But not only that, maybe I can benefit from understanding the cause, just as I benefited the most in my life by understanding the cause of my problems through midwifery. What if I understood the cause of midwifery itself? Why is there midwifery, and why do we have problems? Now, the key word we've been using is the word intelligible. That's kind of a tricky one. I don't hear it much. And it was one that confused me for a long time. Intelligible does include reason and understanding, yes, but it also includes something called knowledge, or knowledge is the wrong word, nous. It's a Greek word because we don't have one in English. It's the ability for ousia to not just reflect through time and gain understanding, but to reflect all at once and know it as a oneness. It is knowable in that sense. That's nous. That's what intelligible means. So these principles that exist to create and sustain the physical world, including our problems, have to exist in their own kind of special way outside of time and space. Necessarily so. Now, what's interesting is you can understand that, which is important, but you can also verify your understanding in direct experience of it. That's the true nature of philosophy. And that's what we become open to in freeing ourselves from our blocks to philosophy, our blocks from sharing in the logos, sharing in rationality, sharing in intelligibility. It ain't belief, folks. You actually go there, you go to check it out. That's intelligibility. The intelligence that creates your problems is doing so for a reason, and that reason we can wonder about after we're free or while we're going through the process. Why am I having these problems? Not just the specific cause, but why do problems themselves exist? And why are they understandable through midwifery? And what is it that created this whole game and why? So these are all the higher levels of Usia that we can apply as we go. Why are we in this game? Why does it even exist? And is the purpose good? Do we benefit from having gone through this process more than if we didn't have problems to begin with? So we're gaining the understanding, and because it's intelligible, we're confirming our understanding in direct experience, the metaphysical experience of that intelligence. Oh, that's why. So, interesting game that we're in, and the best game in town. I posit it's really the only game in town because we're all in it, whether we like it or not. It's just a matter of whether we are consciously doing what we're here to do, master the logos applied to freeing ourselves from problems, midwifery, and then using that freedom to do what we just said. Reflect on the nature of problems themselves. Reflect on the nature of intelligence itself. To not just understand it, but directly experience it. So we're either doing that consciously, or we are going to be a slave to our pathologos. And that's what we've been learning about. The fact that we have problems shows us that whether we know it or not, there is a kind of force creating patterns, creating repeating patterns, repeating cycles that push us in a certain direction, that create the same conditions in our relationships, create the same conditions in our conversations, create the same conditions as we approach our goals, that limit us, that block us. So there's something pulling the strings. We call it a psychic parasite, the pathologos. So we want to understand that pathologos and free ourselves from it. But it's important to recognize that this is not personal. All human beings are in this game. All human beings are fundamentally governed in a slave-like relationship. Now we can wonder what's the difference between being governed as a slave by the pathologos and being ruled by the logos. What would be the differences? Why do we call it a slave? If you're a slave, are you working for your benefit or never for your benefit, only for the ruling class or the master, like capitalism? So the same problems we are facing as we're a slave to a unjust ruler, the pathologos, we also play out on the macro with politics. So if you want to understand politics, understand midwifery and the pathologos. Makes things very, very simple, very, very, very straightforward. Why? Because the pathologos doesn't care about your well-being. It only cares about its maintaining of its own power. Just like the ruling class, we all know capitalism is terribly the same qualities: irrational, immature, harmful. Created not by something conscious, but as a byproduct of history and tradition. We inherited it. We don't we don't every month reflect on our system and wonder whether or not it should be the way it is. We say, no, it has to be the way it is. It's the way it always is. So all of the same things we can apply to pathologos, we can apply to politics, which is just the human soul writ large. Which is the question that we began with. Why are we still fighting Nazis? As a race, why are we still fighting Nazis? Well, we need to find the cause. That's this intelligibility. We can reflect on ourselves to find the cause. Why are we still fighting Nazis? Well, what's the cause of that? Well, we're human beings. We're governed by our level of intelligence. What's the cause of that? And our problems, what's the cause of that? That's the pathologos. That's what we're after. And the relationship we're in is a slave. Like, Nazis get to do Nazi stuff because there are lots of slaves, people who have been convinced to act against their own best interests and the best interests of humanity. Fascists, racism, sexism, all those sorts of negative things. Very, very common. And we know through capitalism, we can see the people earning the most money are the people who play into that. The right-wing grifters, we call them. People who are openly sexist and misogynistic and fascist and lick the boots of the capitalists. They are the ones that are supported by the system. They are the ones that are employed. They are the ones that get clicks. They are the ones that work on news networks, and so on and so on. So the system is perpetuating itself for its own sake rather than what it's supposed to do as a ruler. The system that rules should always, by its nature, its purpose, the purpose of the role, should benefit the people that it rules over. Just like a doctor. A doctor doesn't prescribe medicine because it makes him rich, unless, of course, at the time of recording, the American health system is being forced to reflect on itself and surface all of those bootlickers and snakes who are trying to maintain an unjust healthcare system, not because it benefits people, but because it makes the rich richer at the expense of human suffering and the destruction of the planet we all share. The most irrational, but of course, tradition. So what? Okay, if a doctor functioned in that way, anywhere else, they would lose their license because the doctor has a job to care for the people that it has rulership over, not to line his own pockets. Now, you say, well, in capitalism, there is an imperative, otherwise how is he going to pay the rent? Yes, but that's a different art. Or it's not even art, really. The skill of making money is different from the art of medicine, and we make that distinction. Otherwise, you are a corrupt doctor. Same thing, too, with our society. Capitalism doesn't help anyone, but the people at the top and the bootlickers they employ, they throw scraps to. They are rewarded in a little bit, in a small amount, compared to what they would get if they stopped fighting against their own interests, because they function to keep it alive, irregardless of whether or not it does benefit. So in other words, that's the slavery. We are slaves to an unjust system politically at the time of recording. Just as, and the cause for that, like, why are we being so irrational? That's just stupid. Like, you only have to think for 5 minutes to realize that's a dumb system. Why don't we change? We have to find the cause of it. That's the pathologos. So whether we're talking about our race as humans or whether we're talking about ourselves, it's the same thing, same principle. The cause of both, our individual unhappiness and our collective, is the pathologos, which is what? Being a slave to an unjust ruler. The false belief about self and reality that we got without the logos, it's an imitation, it was a big scam, doesn't serve us. That's why it's a problem. It's a problem because it specifically blocks you from doing the things that benefit you the most. That's how we recognize a problem. If you had an intuition to stop you crossing the road when a truck was coming, we wouldn't say that's a problem. We'd say that's a great thing because it's benefiting you. If you had a voice that encouraged you to pursue your most meaningful goals, or do philosophy, or master midwifery, we wouldn't say that's a problem because that voice is encouraging you to reach your most meaningful goals. A block is a block because it's specifically doing the opposite, blocking you from your most meaningful goals and telling you to do things that are harmful to you. So by nature, it is an unjust ruler. So we are either in a slave relationship, being human beings, with an unjust tyrannical ruler called the Pathologos. And you might want to check out our reading of the Republic, because in Book 9 of the Republic, Socrates goes into great depth about the nature of the tyrant. And we can wonder, if he had the language of midwifery, would he call it a pathologos? That's a question. So all human beings are either in that, where they're a slave, which is stripping their human beings from their goals, their energy to reach their goals, their confidence in their ability to reach their goals, their sense of self-worth. All of the things we need to reach our goals can be sabotaged by the unjust ruler of the pathologos that every human being gets. So why are we still fighting Nazis? No doi, because we haven't actually addressed the cause of the problem. Obviously, if we're still ruled by Nazis, we're going to have Nazis within our soul. Nazis, fascist, capitalists, you use the word, which means any of those words that mean being ruled by an unjust tyrant that's specifically working to block your development and working against the benefit of those people it is a ruler over. A corrupt doctor, a scammer, a grifter, a propagandist instead of a news reporter. Same thing. So what? So if all human beings get that, what kind of a world do we live in? It seems to be that we're amassing evidence to say that we are living in a cruel or unjust system because we all get this unjust ruler. Unless it is understandable and we are able to remove ourselves from it. But not only that, unless there is a necessity to having to go through that process. In other words, you are benefited more by first having a problem, removing it, learning the method for removing it, mastering that method of removing it, and integrating that kind of mastership through understanding and experience. So now you just see the world through that. We see the world through our understanding. If you speak English, you don't have to think about it, you just do it. Is there a benefit we get from being that sort of a soul, seeing reality through the logos and an understanding of the pathologos, naturally at all times, that we wouldn't have gained if we didn't have a problem in the first place? That's our question. That's the big one. Otherwise, why go through all the time and hassle? Or if you have friends in the game, we can say, take out the word hassle and say fun. Why go through the fun of having a problem and the problem itself isn't fun. But why go through the suffering of having a problem and the fun of learning to master the art of midwifery if we didn't benefit? If we can't show that we benefited as a soul within a greater timeline than just this world, just this physical world, then we can't show that we live in a caring and intelligible universe. But the beginning of chapter 2 of this book promises us that we can. It's entirely possible to prove, verify and prove for ourselves. Which means the question that opened this chapter, it's entirely possible to prove we live in a caring and intelligible universe. We are adding to it. We're building up this question. To carry a question is to be on a quest, but we are improving it. We're adding this idea of benefit and this idea of necessity. It is necessary for us to have problems and go through the art of mastering dialectic and midwifery. It's necessary. Not only necessary, it is beneficial for us to do it rather than not. And that benefit has to have an effect in our spiritual experiences, in wherever we go when we die, wherever we go after we die, in our incarnations or reincarnations. We have to be able to understand and prove that. Otherwise, how can we show we live in a caring and understandable, intelligible universe? It's important. Because that's what we're here for. It's important in the first level because we want to escape our suffering. The second level, we want to stop being unjust to others and perpetuating the cycles of violence and suffering. But on an even higher level, we're here to learn something. And whatever it is that we are learning, we better be able to take it with us in our journey to go beyond. Otherwise, the nihilists or the capitalists will say, who cares about the benefit of our soul? Let's just abuse people as much as we can to amass profit so I can buy all the nice, shiny, physical things. Or get famous. So the love of physical desires or the love of physical fame or human fame. Again, this is the Republic. Socrates speaks to three kinds of pleasures. The pleasures that humans get by fulfilling their physical needs, so people who like to be rich, who seem to be running things, the pleasure we get from fame or honor or status or good job positions in the world. And a third kind of pleasure he calls philosophy. The pleasure of wisdom. Now we are wondering what wisdom is. It's something to do with the logos. Maybe it's what we've just been talking about. The understanding, the experience, and the seeing through the mastery of the logos that you would not have done if you weren't given a problem, which requires you to understand the path of logos, apply your understanding and experience, and integrate both into a way of being, especially after you're free of your path of logos. So 3 kinds of pleasure Socrates talks about that can govern people, and he says, he makes an argument. By the way, who is in a position to judge what's better? Because the money grubber, people who think the pleasure of being wealthy is it. They don't know what it's like to be famous, usually, and definitely they don't know what wisdom is. Make the same argument for the famous person. Usually they're also rich, so maybe they can say what's better. Is it better to be rich or is it better to be famous? But only the philosopher has the ability to experience all 3. What's the philosopher? What we are doing here. True philosophy. Mastering the logos and the dialectic in a way that we understand it, free ourselves from our problems, because not only do we understand it, definition, we apply it, demonstration, but also conclusion. We put it together into a way of being that elevates us, that benefits us. We have learned, and it's a kind of learning that we can possibly take with us beyond this physical life, because we're not learning about physical things. It would make no sense to spend your life learning about what's the best football player if you die and then you go to a different planet, or you go to a different time in history where football doesn't exist. Why waste your time learning that? Why not learn that which applies to being, that which is eternal? That's the logos. So that's why we say it's the only game in town. Pierre, the author of this book, calls it the noblest game. True philosophy. This I think was motivated by one of his good friends, Alan Watts, who said life is a game. And Pierre said, well, the noblest game is philosophy. I might even say, well, it's the only game, really. Because we're all either a slave to our pathologos, or we are consciously going through that development that we're here to go through. Learning to understand, experience, and master, integrate and master the logos. We wouldn't be able to do, perhaps, if we didn't have a problem spurring us on, motivating us on, maybe. So we're either a slave to the pathologos, or we are consciously playing the game, the noblest game, the only game, so that we can be a master of ourselves. Maybe even that's not saying it correctly. Maybe it's sharing in the logos and allowing the logos to be our master. But even that separation of logos and self, being ruled by the logos, looking for the intelligibility in our language, looking for the problems that take us away from the logos, looking for blocks to be evidence of our problem, but also following the logos that drags us, or doesn't drag us, guides us to our goals, looking for the coincidences, looking for the repetitions and patterns and symmetries and orders in language and reality that guide us to our positive. That is being ruled by the logos. Wondering how and why it works, following the logos, but even then, that might lead to a realization that the logos that has been your master, good master, beneficial master, might be no different from self. Maybe. It's a big question. I'm going to wonder about that for a long time, hopefully. So is it self-mastery? Or is it good mastery by the logos because the logos is intelligible and caring, or is it self-mastery? How are they the same? How are they different? We can wonder about those questions as we continue to read. So that's where we are, and let's jump in. Is it possible that a pathologos, right here, this red, is an unconscious entity? If so, then it would be right to conclude that it cannot be resolved by any rational procedure. If that is the case, then our own reflections and theory are suspect. Right? Do we want to end the game straight away? Hey, listen. Hey, maybe this irrational and unconscious. Right? People talk that way. Now you would say, well, the people in any system, the people who say, oh, it's just not understandable, are usually the people who are the dumbest, people who haven't understood anything. You can't understand medicine. What? Those are the sorts of people who don't go to medical school. Equally so, the people who don't understand problems are the ones who say you can't understand problems. Earlier in the series, I gave the analogy of the dog whisperer versus the dog nanny. The dog whisperer showed a higher level of understanding of dog problems and was able to rehabilitate aggressive dogs. The dog nanny had a lesser understanding, so she would say, oh, you just can't understand that problem, and she would kill the dogs. So, be dog whisperer, don't be dog nanny. In the everyday course of events, the presence of pathologos does seem to go undetected, but that is not to say that it is unconscious. Learning how to describe what previously has never been expressed in words is the process of the pathologos. So it goes undetected. It's our blind spot, to use the language that's used in midwifery sometimes, because it wasn't put into words. Absence of the logos. So putting into words what was previously not put into words, that's the process of surfacing the pathologos, but also that activity, we could say, reflecting on what we're doing, adding that higher level, we're learning the logos. We're learning language. Learning how to use language in the best way. Being wordless, it is unavailable to thought, and therefore it has the character of being unknown. So one of the things we're looking for patterns and order. We're also looking for symmetry. So everything we're learning as a principle applying to the pathologos, we can double dip. We can look for the symmetry between the unjust ruler. Let's write it on the board. Okay. So we're using the idea of rulership. So we've got the pathologos, and we've got the logos, or the self-logos. Let's say self-logos, because the word self has an important significance. Okay, so far we've already talked about, and make your own list. This is just a starting point for you guys and girls. Pathologos, we talked about it. Okay, actually this is good because we can pull out from our reflection the key words that, in order to make it a object of understanding, not only are we putting words on both, which is what we're reading, we're putting words on what we hadn't put words on before, but we want to then use those words and organize those words, order those words. That's how we turn it into understanding. So we've got certain key terms like tyrant, unjust, immature, harmful, blocking, sabotaging, okay, so take these words and the other ones that came up for you as you were listening or reflecting and arrange them into the structure of the dialectic. That's the game. And share it. Share it with us. Share it with us on the channel, in the comment section of YouTube. You can join the Discord and share it with each other, because you're not supposed to be getting it right. You're just supposed to be doing it. It's a relationship. We talked about being in this game, but the game is happening through time. It's a relationship. It's a back and forth. You have experiences. That's what I'm going to do. You have experiences, but then you reflect upon it. Reflect upon it with, this is the key thing, you don't just want to make sense of your experience through your own false beliefs and justify the ignorance that you're already carrying, like a debate. With logos, that's the key words, and dialectic, that's the key structure of the logos. So we have the experiences, and then we have the reflection upon it, which will then allow us to have different kinds of experiences, and the cycle continues. That's the relationship we are in. And we can make it with the logos, we can make it a good and beneficial relationship. And ultimately, if we're doing that, we can be having fun. So this is why we said, hey, this is intelligible doesn't mean just rational. Even the best kind of rationality, logos and dialectic, you have to be able to experience it. Philosophy ain't dry, it's not academic, it's a spiritual method. But equally so, it ain't like the other spiritual methods that try and just have experiences without understanding, either through faith or belief or meditation or chanting or drugs or dance or all these other sorts of ways that can elicit experiences, but unless you are also reflecting on them, you're not actually learning anything. At best, you're getting addicted to the method, which usually gives you diminishing returns. In other words, you might have had this great awakening experience with this or that method, and then the next time you try it, doesn't work as well. something built into reality is saying, hey, you just can't have the same experiences without learning anything. That's not growth. That's called chasing the dragon. Try and have that high experience without this. That's addiction. That's chasing the dragon. And what we are doing is understanding how to do that. Like, we can understand how can we have the best kinds of experiences. We talked about, hey, let's not be Nazis. Let's adjust our political system to that which actually benefits. Let's spend our time having fun doing this rather than, I don't know, polluting the environment for the short-term wealth of a small handful of disgusting people. So let's do this instead of, I don't know, even just playing football. Why not? So we can talk about how to have the best experiences and how to judge the best experiences. But what we are doing here in reading this book, we are learning about this. How can we do this better? How can we do our reflections, our understanding? And we've identified recognizing or remembering or recognizing. Let's make some more space on the board. Recognizing or remembering even. Maybe the logos is within the self, so we are remembering. We are remembering what we at one level know. Recognizing, remembering, and following the self logos. That's what we especially focus on when we read Socrates. But also it's similar, so this is the symmetry. We look for symmetry. This also applies in a similar way. Similar, so like and different to recognizing and removing pathologos. So that's the two halves of the game. This part of the game, which itself has two halves. All right, so that's the game. Looks pretty neat. Look at that there. So this idea of symmetry. So we look for key terms. We've already talked about ordering them. I'm not going to do it for you because I would be like the corrupt doctor who wants to do everything for his own benefit and not the benefit of others as well. Well, not exactly the same as the doctor, because I am doing this for my benefit too. Your job is to order these terms as best you can in the dialectic and share them with your friends. But the other part of it is looking for symmetry. Can you take each of those things that you have been playing with and find the equivalent? Now, symmetry doesn't mean the same, it means likeness, both same and different. What would the true ruler be, the opposite of the tyrant? I'll do this one for you. Just, so to be ruled by the self-logos, if this follows the symmetry of the logos, because by the way, the dialectic has two parts. Dialectic on the board. Here you go. Okay, let's just do... Oh, we've got to start here. Let's just keep this. Structure of the dialectic. Maybe we started and continue. Here we go. Structure of the dialectic. Two ideas, self and other. But then also there is two categories, main categories. That's not how you spell two. Two categories. What is and what isn't. And then we have four subcategories. Definition. Self to itself. What can you say about the subject itself? what can you say about how it demonstrates or functions? Self to other, so that's the self or the subject, and the other. Just 4 ways of 4 permutations or combinations of these 2 ideas. Having been affected, how do these people then relate to others? So we're saying, hey, in philosophy, we are defining by reading, but we're demonstration. So this is we just said over here. Yeah, gain understanding by reflecting on the text, but put it in your experience. Actually apply it to your problems. Actually apply it to your meaningful goals. Do you get happier? Do you get more free? Do you get more clear? Do you get more light? Often people talk about a lightness, and so on and so on. Do you have these experiences, metaphysical experiences? So that's the definition and demonstration, but we've also been talking about, hey, not only are we to develop our understanding and our experience, we want to integrate it into our state of being through what we're calling mastership. Mastership. We want to see the world like with English. I see the world through English. See the world through this art of the logos. And we've been talking about doing that. So that's division. How can you, having done those 2 things, notice it rolls on, it's a flow, it's a development. Having done this and this, how can you then relate these others here? So this self relates to this self, so we've defined it, we've gained a better understanding of ourselves or the self logos or whatever our topic is. Then we apply this self here is the thing that follows on, not this first self, the second self up here. This rolls on because that's what we demonstrate. And then having demonstrated it, we have been affected by this whole process. How do we then relate to others? That's division. Having been affected, can we act as a ruler ourselves, as a just ruler ourselves, as a midwife ourselves, as a philosopher ourselves? And then finally, after having gone through that, this is even a kind of experience. So what do we do with experiences? We reflect on them. Experiences and then reflection. So what? So, hey, you'd even want to reflect on your own division, on your own functioning towards others. And that's what we've been asking today. That's been our topic today. Why even have problems? Can we show that there is a justice, a necessity, a beauty, a benefit to having problems? So it's not personal. So we talk about sharing with our friends. You might not you won't recognize your problems, otherwise there wouldn't be much of a problem, but your friends can help you because they might recognize the word in midwifery is idiosyncrasies, the characteristic words that you tend to use. Like you might have a friend who always puts himself down and he thinks that's normal, that's just what the world is. He doesn't recognize it as abnormal or against the logos. But you might be able to recognize it being his friend and artfully practice this by asking him questions that can help him reflect on a pattern so he can develop this as well to become free of his problems. So, reflecting on why develop this mastery? Why be a good friend in that way? The best kind of friend in that way? Why spend however many years you have here on this planet doing this? Why learn this rather than learning how to maximize profits for shareholders? Why do this rather than learning how to, make the best fantasy football team? Why do this rather than spending your life justifying the crappy false beliefs that you inherited from your religion and your family and your society? Why do this rather than be a better tyrant? So that reflection on our functioning with mastership, in other words, this rolls over, or rather, this is interesting because you can reflect of either how you're functioning as this other, or the effect you're having on others. How do others affect? And take both of them together, and that rolls on here, or both of them together, and say, from this, what can you say about the whole game? Conclusion. And conclusion has analysis or synthesis. What can you synthesize from having acted with mastery? And analysis. How does this synthesis relate back to the original definition? So the original thing that we're here to define, the logos, the self-logos, the self or the self-logos, put them together, why not? The self-logos. Having mastered it and experienced in your life what it's like to have a mastery of the self-logos, what can you say about it? What can you say about the logos? Is the logos just? Is it unjust? Did you need to have gone through this? Do you benefit from having developed that mastery? And can you make a conclusion about the reality we're in? So our talk today, whether we liked it or not, was following the structure of the dialectic. That's why I say we're in this game whether we like it or not. We talked about what we are doing, defining what we're doing on this channel with the logos and pathologos, demonstrating it, showing how, hey, we have to put it into experience. That's the difference between rationality and intelligibility. There's actually an experience of the realm of the logos, of the realm of being. But we talked about having to integrate both into our way of being, to have a mastery, to learn. And then we talked about what's the significance of this kind of learning that we can potentially take with us, that's different from the loving of money, different from getting famous. This kind of learning, how will that affect our incarnations? How will that affect the soul? And if it's the only thing that we can actually learn that we can take with us, if it's the only thing that actually benefits the soul from that wider perspective, can we make a conclusion about the meaning of life? Not a personal opinion, but a definition of the truth of the meaning of life for everyone, what we call the destiny of man. And can we take that conclusion or that synthesis and say, hey, how can we analyze it back on the original topic, mastery of the logos, or the self, and gain an understanding of a better understanding of that? Can we conclude that the logos is actually just? Because we learnt something, we were driven to the meaning of life, we benefited at this high level. Can we then allow that insight to better inform our definition and say, yes, we do live in a caring world, even though we have these shitty problems that cause suffering if we don't play this dialectic game. So that's why I'm saying it's the only game in town. We are doing it anyway. Only we can ask the question, by taking everything we've talked about so far today and rearranging it or reordering it within this structure, do we benefit? Again, reflecting on our experience. Can we better understand what happened today? Do we feel more comfortable? Have we more integrated it? Did we follow it better? Did we understand it better by saying, hey, that's what we did today. We did that, then that, then that, and then that, which had two parts. These are questions we can have. Now, notice there are two categories, which means each one of these has its symmetry. This is the idea of symmetry reflected in this category. So what we are defining in midwifery is what isn't true of the self-logos. What we are seeing in our problems is how we function unjustly and harmfully when we are not ruled by the self-logos, but we are ruled by the pathologos. Our division is, well, how do we then rule others? Or how will that affect our life? And then we can come to a conclusion about our whole lives. So this is what we do in the dialectic. It has two categories and 4 subcategories. That is reflected to make 8 subcategories. That's the structure of the dialectic. So what? So that means everything we learn when we read this book, all these insights we're getting from Pierre, a master of midwifery who's written the book, we can say, oh, not only am I learning about the definition or the or any of these, but I can have a double dip and ask a question, how will that help me understand philosophy? It's a fun game you can play. Look for the symmetry in how it's reflected in the other category. So what we just read was, we talked about being ruled by a tyrant. Ooh, what's its symmetrical equivalent? If the pathologos is a distortion of the logos, what's its symmetry? Does that mean that if our problems are that we're ruled by the pathologos, are we doing good if we are ruled by the logos? If being ruled a slave to the pathologos is unjust, does that mean being ruled by the logos is just? So, do the rest. Take your list or this list and fill it out and have fun and share it. That's the dialectic. That's looking for not just terms, but order of terms, because hopefully you've reordered it. Which of these is the definition, which of these is the functioning, which of these is the division, and which of these is the conclusion. Practice. But then, look for symmetry. Have fun. Gain insights, new insights. And the cool thing about this is, it's intelligible. These insights you will be able to show for yourself that it's true. It's a truth that you can take with you your whole life if it's the truth. And beyond this life, but also you can experience it. You might have an experience of the self-logos in a non-physical way, and you might recognize, oh, justice. Oh, whatever the opposite of harmful is. Oh, I want this to be my ruler. Because experiencing the nature of reality ain't enough. You have to also reflect upon it to understand it. Not just understand it, but using the principle of symmetry, look for similar things so that in this experience of reality or the logos, directly, all at once, not through time, can you identify the false beliefs you might have been carrying when you come back into your body or whatever, and remove what's false. So, have fun. Let's jump back into the text. Okay. Being wordless, it is unavailable to thought and therefore has the character of being unknown. So another benefit of the kind of reflection and organization and ordering using the logos, using the dialectic, is after you've made one conclusion, you can carry it with you into your reading. The next thing we just read was, being wordless, it is unavailable to thought. Well, we just came to a conclusion, a hypothesis, that the purpose for us being here is to master the dialectic and the logos? Being wordless, it is unavailable to thought. So what we're doing is mastering the logos or mastering words. So we can add this to our conclusion. Of course we're here to master the logos, because if you don't put the logos on things, if you don't put the correct words on things, you can't have them available to thought. Which helps us to understand the other idea. You see through your understanding. If the logos, or putting words on things, or unifying through words, is understanding, and you see through your understanding, we can better understand that idea by this idea. If it's not in words, it's not available to thought. So how can you think through it or see through it? It has the character of being unknown. We also talked about the other half, the symmetrical side. If the pathologos is the false view of the self that acts as a tyrannical, a tyrant to our lives and our soul, then how do we come to know the true master, the true self-logos? Well, if it's not in words, it will be unknown. Therefore, our job must be to put words on the nature of the logos, put words on the nature of self and being. We just got an extra little bit of a nugget of insight because as we are reading, we are doing it. We are organizing the text itself with the logos and the dialectic, the very thing the text is telling us to do. And we're rewarded for it. Or we gain benefit from maybe benefit rather than reward. Reward tends to be something other than the thing itself. You do what I say, I give you a cookie. You earn me profits, I give you enough money to barely afford rent. That's your reward for doing something. Benefit is the intrinsic reward. You're doing it not because of something else that you were given, like a tyrant might use, but because the thing itself is valuable. So we're benefiting as we read. The existence of the pathologos is not the product of deep instinctual urgings. That's interesting because we have talked about the pathologos being stronger than even enlightenment, or stronger than the soul's desire to master enlightenment, because the urge to imitate the cosplaying gurus, usually our parents, is stronger than the desire for truth. So maybe you've had a conversation with people and it's going swimmingly, and then they'll reach a problem when they start acting stupid. They start talking nonsense or filibustering the conversation or getting personal or being irate. And you're thinking, why are you being irrational when you were being so rational up until now? And you let them talk for a little bit longer and you realize, oh, they're just defending their parents' beliefs. They grew up Jewish and now they're just saying, oh, Jewish is good. Or they grew up in a rich family and they're defending capitalism. The urge to defend the beliefs we get from our people imitating knowledge is more primal and stronger than our desire to be rational. Making the imitation of the pathologos, the desire to fight for what harms us, to be a loyal, like, why are we still fighting Nazis? This is the idea. Because we're fighting Nazis within ourselves. When we defend the tradition, we're being a Nazi, we're being a fascist. Defending the false beliefs that actively harm us because that's how we grew up. Because our rulers appeared knowing when they were doing what they were doing. So we're still fighting Nazis in our soul. Which is why we're still fighting Nazis globally as a species. Okay, so that's interesting. So we've already seen the idea of urges being trumping desires, but here he's saying it's not a deep instinctual urging. So in other words, let's keep reading. The conflict exists because the mind cannot abide with its own failure. The mind seeks the resolution of our problems. It presents us with unresolved fragments in the everyday pattern of thoughts which occupy so much of our attention. They are presented to our consciousness as puzzles to be solved. The fragments are reminders of what needs completion. And only when we bring together all the parts into a meaningful unity. That's when it's only possible when we bring it together into a meaningful unity. So, this idea is different from what we were just talking about. The primal urge of imitation to imitate the clan leader, which again is self-Nazism. You are actively working against your own interest because that's exactly what causes your problems and your blocks. What he is talking about here is some people try to explain problems as just an instinctual urge. In fact, any system of oppression begins with that premise. So if you want to operate a system of oppression, you wanted to oppress people, you could say, well, how can I do it? How can I, first of all, create a division? I'm white. I want to have black slaves. Okay, so I can't just do that. No one's going to accept that. But if I say there is a deep instinctual urging of black people to be bad or selfish or criminal, then I can justify oppression, especially if I can get them to believe it. With Christianity, the idea of sin. We are closer to God, or because we're speaking for Jesus. Jesus didn't have sin, but you do. You are a bad person. You have an it's called innate sin. You have a deep instinctual urging to evil. You're a nasty child, and you will only gain salvation if you give up your rulership to me. So every system has it. Religions have that. All of them. I just picked out Christianity, but you pick one. Any system that has a system that is based in belief. Because you have to justify the fact that you are too stupid to gain logos. The very thing you're here for. You're not good enough. They are, so you should let them rule you. Pick any system of oppression. Capitalism. Well, economics is very complicated. Inflations and Dow Jones. You are too stupid to realize it. Now give me all your money. We are smarter and better. So you can't criticize capitalism. And business. Well, we get to be rich because we take more risks. We're better at managing people, says Elon Musk. So I get to have all the money. You get to starve and die. Why? Because you're not born that way. You have a deep instinctual urging to be lazy. And if I wasn't telling you what to do, you'd be lazy every day. You'd sit on the couch and eat Doritos, and then you would just eat yourself into an early death. So you need me. Because I'm better. I have motivation. I'm inspired. Forget the fact that I just happen to be win the lottery and be born into a rich, privileged family. That's pretty much 99% of all capitalist rich people. Ignore that. That's not true. I have to create a narrative where you have a deep instinctual urging and innate nature of badness to justify oppression. So, police oppression. You are innately a criminal. You need us to shoot you when you go against the system because you're criminal. You're bad, you need us. Capitalist businessman. You're selfish, you need capitalism. Businessman. You're lazy, you need to be a slave. Racism, you're black or brown or whatever. You're innately bad and what do they call? You're innately irrational. Monkeys, you need us to rule you. Religion, you're innately a sinner. You have the devil in your soul. You need us to blah, 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 blah. All of them. So what we are realizing is that's not true. Of course, none of those systems, none of it's true. None of that's true. We're not innately criminals, therefore defund the police. We're not innately selfish, therefore replace capitalism with a rational, mature system. We're not innately all evil, so stop wars. You can solve problems through understanding. Right? We're not innately sinners, so do away with religion. We can understand. Don't need to believe if we understand. All of those. All of them. Easy. But what we're also seeing is, okay, not only is that not true in any of those systems, it's not true with our problems. You're not an innately bad person. The conflict exists because your mind cannot abide with your own failure. So, if the cause of our blocks from our own highest state of being, which we were understanding earlier, what would it be like to be in the state of being of mastership of the logos, the self and the self-logos? If you are blocking yourself from it, the mind says, no, that's not fair. I don't want that for you. I don't want you to be less. I don't want you to be oppressed. I don't want you to be a slave to a disgusting tyrant. Be better. So I'm going to give you the pieces of the puzzles, the unsolved fragments in the pattern of your logos, your thoughts, your words. And it's going to distract you. Isn't that bad? No. It's a gift. If you complete the fragments, if you put the puzzle piece together, you bring together the parts into a meaningful unity, the parts that have not been put into words yet, then you will realize, oh, that's the cause of my problem. I'm not crap. I'm not shit. I'm not innately bad or a sinner or greedy or selfish. I can actually understand. I am here for a purpose. That purpose is to know the self through this mastery. I can become a good person which is nothing other than to be ruled by the self-logos. Or, once you've integrated it, self-ruled. So again, our problems are not evidence that you suck or reality sucks. It's evidence of a deep care. And a care that is solved through understanding. So an intelligent care. There we have our intelligence, or intelligibility, and there we have our care. Let's keep reading. I needed some coffee and cookie. It is those parts that have not yet been put into words that we experience as states of mind. Interesting. And these states of mind are imposed upon circumstances similar to the original insult of the pathologos scene. So, so here is the idea, the same back and forth. If we don't have words, we have them as experiences, states of mind. So we feel bad, we feel crushed, we feel scared, we feel inadequate because we haven't put the words on it. So what? If we don't put the words on it, we'll just continue to have that negative states of mind. We'll keep blocked, that's suffering. Isn't that suffering? And then eventually it'll become a cancer and you'll die from it. Therefore, we need to go from here to here. Put the words on it. Then you don't have to experience it as a state of mind. Interesting. Fascinating. Okay, and it comes up into, this is the idea of symmetry that we've been talking about. Likeness. Circumstances similar. Not the same. So again, we can look for the patterns of the words or patterns of states of mind. Every time I'm in this situation, I feel this way. Take note, those are the puzzle pieces. But also, use symmetry. Oh, what was similar about this situation, I wonder? Whenever I'm talking in public, I wonder what that was similar to of my original origin scene, the original insult against the self. Notice, also this is a clue about the pathologos. Yourself was insulted. And you believed it, took the blame. So you could say the origin of even, so we say we got this tyrant ruling our souls, the pathologos. The origin even of that tyrant was an original insult against the self. Therefore, we believed it. We come up with, without words, a false belief about self and reality because of that original insult that becomes the tyrant. The intense struggle to confront and express the content of the pathologos accurately in words puts an end to the mystery. Yay, we can solve our problem. And the energy caught in the wordless phenomena is released, so we can gain energy. Part of the way you can be sabotaged from your goal is the psychic parasite. It can sap your energy. Energy is a big one. We can free that energy. So the roots of the pathologos are not to be found in the unconscious, since its primary mode of existence is wordless. So that's a big difference. So some people in our world currently don't understand problems, and they'll say, "Oh, it's just the subconscious." Dreams are the same way. Dreams also are an avenue of communication of the self-logos in the same way. But those who don't understand dreams say, "Oh, it's just subconscious." Same things with problems. People who don't have the logos need another way of explaining it. They'll say, "Oh, it's unconscious or subconscious." So we don't use those words in philosophy. It's not unconscious or subconscious, it's wordless. Or the even more ignorant will say, "Oh, it's the devil." Completely rejecting everything about intelligibility. And then you ask them, "Well, how did you come up with this? Did you meet the devil? How did you come up with this idea that problems are caused not by a false belief and and a word, specifically a falseless word belief generated from an insult against the self. But actually there's actually a dude that really enjoys making you suffer for no other reason, and you're going to call him the devil. Where did you learn that? Oh, my parents happen to believe it. Now, some people try and hide that fact and they'll say, oh no, just personal experience. The school of hard knocks. In other words, I used I projected my pathologos state of mind onto similar experiences as a way of justifying that original false belief. I don't know that because I haven't read this book. And the specific nature of a false belief is to prevent you from learning for yourself. So every time I decided to ousia, reflect on my experiences and states of mind with logos words, I was blocked. And then you might even ask, well, what kind of block? Oh, I thought the devil would eat me. So you can see the self-protecting mechanism of false beliefs. Hey, the devil's causing you to have problems. And by the way, if you ever question that, the devil will eat you. Now, that's a joke because, we tell children are scared by saying the monster will eat you, but it's worse. It's literally worse. Not only will the monster eat you, it will burn you alive for all eternity. So child abuse, literal child abuse. People won't like to hear that. If their particular religion has that style of child abuse, it doesn't make it not true. Easy. Point to another religion that says, if you eat meat on a Sunday, you will get burned alive for eternity. Is that child abuse? Of course. But not yours. That's the Nazism. How do people fight for the Nazis? This. An allegiance to the unsuspected, wordless false beliefs that cause them to act in an unjust way. So it's wordless, and that's what people defend when they defend their own harmful beliefs. Interesting. It's not found in the unconscious. It's not the devil. It's not the unconscious. It's simply wordless. And when I say it's child abuse, it's a very easy one to see. The idea why it's people don't like that is what we're talking about is the movement from beliefs to understanding. And we have today been talking about plus experience plus ousia or reflection plus reflection and logos and dialectic plus integration plus mastership, because you're also using it to benefit. But pretty much the movement from beliefs to understanding. Now we can say, well, what areas do we accept that? So, do a dialectic. Dialectic has two categories, is and what isn't. When is that demanded and when isn't it? Well, if you were to fly a plane, pilot, do we demand understanding and integrative experience, like putting this understanding into experience, or can you just have the belief, I believe I'm a pilot, I should get to fly that jet? Why do you believe it? You don't ask a why question about beliefs. Because why is system of reflection and understanding and logic to the cause. That's understanding. Belief isn't that. You can just believe it because you grew up in a family, or you grew up in a society, or you liked that belief. Saying reflection upon causes is reason and logic. That's the realm of understanding. That's not anything to do with belief. It's just not a part of the field. So we know that a pilot demands this movement. You can't just say, I believe I'm a pilot because you're drunk and sitting in first class and you're super confident. No. What about a doctor? Do we demand them to go to school to have an understanding of medicine? They say, well, I've read this holy book. This guy found it under a rock 20,000 years ago. That's too long. 200 years ago, this guy found this ancient book under a rock, and it says that problems are caused by ghosts in your blood, and you can solve any problem with leeches. Oh, do we give them a medical license? No. What about an architect? Can you build a house with your own beliefs about how gravity works or how math works? Now, what realm do we not allow this? Do we not demand a removal of false beliefs and objective understanding, as well as, of course, the application and experience and the use for benefit? Here's one: religion. Here's another one we can put in a similar category: spirituality. Hey, you don't have to have understanding. You can believe whatever the heck you want and start a church and get tax-exempt status and teach it to your children. Politics. Do you know any politician who has demonstrated a removal of false beliefs and a development of understanding that has been tested? I have not met any. In fact, the politicians that so seem to get elected are the ones who embrace their ignorant beliefs. The fascists, the sexists, the racists. And even pulling the strings behind them, the people who are paying those mouthpieces are the people who have the belief that capitalism is good because their family is rich. So what's the difference? Why is this principle allowed in this, but demanded it cannot exist in the other? That's a question for you. What makes the two different? Why do we reject? You can't understand the nature of the soul, the purpose of life. Now, there's a few things you might point out. You can say things like, well, okay, this is the most meaningful to your soul, and this is the most meaningful to society. Interesting. By the way, if some ignorant person flew a plane, they would crash and people would die. You could see that immediately. Whereas in politics, how long does it take for you to see the people dying? By the way, in politics, can you see that the plane was crashed because of the ignorance of the politician, or because it takes time and they can blame other people? In other words, we are saying, hey, there is no consequence. It doesn't matter. Religion, it doesn't matter what you believe. It doesn't affect anyone. Whereas, an architect, the house will fall down and kill people. The doctor, you can't just go away cutting up people when you've got no medical understanding. So we claim this doesn't matter. It doesn't have any consequence. Also, these are the most effective systems of oppression and control. So they will say things like, you can't understand, there is no understanding. Well, everyone's entitled to their own beliefs. But if you reflect on what happens to a child, if they say, hey, asking questions about these things makes you go to hell, what will that affect? How will that affect the psyche of a child? To think that the logos, or asking questions, is evil and will make them suffer in hell forever. That's child abuse. That will have even bigger. These have even bigger consequences, but they're hidden from the public through various lies. Why? Because they afford people the easiest opportunity to play out their own individual pathologos. So all you got to do is bring to light the fact that, hey, the false beliefs we carry cause planes to crash, cause medical torture, cause houses to fall down, also causes harm within the soul, which affects your whole life, also causes harm within the species and the society and the institutions and everything. The lie is there is no causal gap. You could believe anything and there's no consequence. You could vote for anyone and there's no hey, vote for Hitler. Hey, believe a religion that says that you suck because you're a woman. There's no causal connection to suffering. It's a lie. Anyway, so all we're doing is seeing that this is a principle, and we're saying it also applies to spirituality, and we can also say it also applies to politics, but it also applies to human problems. So, the very same kinds of arguments that reject the logos, reject the understandability and knowability, that's intelligibility, and the beneficial nature of understanding in politics, understanding in religion or spirituality, those same arguments will reject the understanding of human problems. I like to put on this side dentist, because you can imagine a crazy person saying, I believe I'm a dentist. But as a metaphor, it's so immediate. What would happen if some crazy person was given a hammer and started hammering into a child's face? Because he believed he was a dentist without any actual demonstrable, provable, factual, objectively true understanding about dentistry. So dentist is a really good one. Now all you gotta do is show how this is exactly the same in religion, or spirituality, politics, and human problems. This is what we do when we read Socrates. This is what we do when we do midwifery. It's your job to fill in the gaps, because these are the two systems of oppression within society. It's our job. It's our human being. This is what we need to do as a species. Apply our understanding of the objective understanding of spirituality, the objective understanding of human problems. This is true philosophy. Run out of space. True philosophy. This is philosophical midwifery. And these two is our job. So these two is what we would do if we not only had it, let's go back to our dialectic. So these two would be self to self, that's our understanding. Self to another, that's our functioning with it. But also, we have a job to do as a species to go to here. So let's do it over here. Others to others. How would we relate to our friends? How would we relate to our job? How would we relate to our loved ones? How would we relate to our species and our institutions? Others to others. That's religion and politics. And finally, after doing that, can we reflect on this whole game together so that we can evolve as a species? That's the dialectic. We are living a dialectic, so that's why I say it's the only game in town. The question is, how artfully can you make this argument to humanity? And how much courage do you have to share your understanding and insights? All right, that's where we are. Good for us. Now, back in here. So, all of that was the consequences that follow if we had the experience, we read this, problems are not unconscious, it's just wordless, and then we reflected on it to gain new insights. We reflected on it, we read the book to gain understanding, we reflected on it, we used the dialectic in our reflection, and we saw how we could integrate our learning for ourselves, and we could see how we benefit society. Taking our understanding and doing this ousia, reflection on it with the logos, with the dialectic. So yeah, we would gain a mastership over our species and planet in the good way, and benefit by recognizing that true philosophy and midwifery are these two. The application to religion and politics would be this, and then finally the reflection as a species on what that means. This. That's growth, that's evolution, that's the benefit. So we're doing it. We're doing it as we're reading it. Demonstration and definition, or definition and demonstration. Which is the dialectic, which is why it's the only game in town. You're either in it, doing it like we're doing, so good for us, or you're being ruled by this side, which is still a dialectic. You are still carrying a false definition. You are still acting in a way that is harmful. You are still acting to everything in a way that's harmful. And you still, at the end of the day, let's see how this is in the dialectic. Let's pull up the dialectic. You're still in a dialectic. You are still over here in this category. You are still carrying a false definition of yourself. Let's get rid of this. That is, as we just read, wordless and unsuspected. You are still acting as a way, demonstrating it. You are still acting in your relationships, your job, your everything you do, still divisioning it. And at the end of the day, you still reflect on your own experiences, come to a conclusion. The only problem is your conclusion is you were right to begin with. I guess I do suck because of all of these things that prove that I suck. So that's why I say it's the only game. You're in it. If the pathologos is believed strangely enough, because being wordless, its absurdity is concealed from us by ourselves, much like a prejudice that is never reflected upon. Learning to put it into words is the process of surfacing the pathologos. What hasn't been put into words is not available for recollection in words. What has not been expressed in words will not surface in reflective thought. And its absence means it will remain unknown but not unconscious. It may have the character of the unknown, but it is accessible to thought and so to analysis. So that's the conclusion. So, he says, hey, just like a prejudice, if you don't reflect on it in words properly, not gossiping in a way that, with other racists to defend your racism, but if you're actually putting it in words, you can see the absurdity of it. Now, we have an example because we just did that, didn't we? Yes, we did. Over here. We put into words, using the logos from the text, using the dialectic, the absurdity of the idea that politics and religion should not demand a removal of false beliefs and a development of understanding, and of course the testing of that understanding in direct experience that can be shown to benefit objectively. In other words, religion and politics being only about beliefs, so any racist, fascist oppressor can abuse people in order for his own pathologos sadist suffering, enjoyment of the suffering of others or their personal wealth and power. That's absurd. But do you know why we don't see it's absurd? Not because we are unconsciously trying to oppress the souls of others in religion, or unconsciously or subconsciously, or we have a primal urge to murder each other in politics and oppress our own species in politics. It's not because of that, but because it's wordless. What we did was put into words, using this analogy, hey, a pilot, a doctor, an architect, we demand this movement. It's absurd we don't demand it from this. Why haven't we demanded this in these areas up until now? Well, at the time of the recording, it's just been after Thanksgiving in America, and it's just been after Christmas. What happens? What's the saying that's very common, at least at this point of the recording, at this part of history? No religion and politics are to be talked about at the dinner table. The most important things to talk about are banned from putting into words. The very same thing we're seeing about human problems. We did not put it into words. There was a kind of a ban, and a wordless imposition. Insinuation that if you put words, if my parents are flipping out right now just by me being in self, then if I questioned this, I could die. That was the imposition. That was the implication. So there was a ban on words when we got our human problems. And many people who, don't do midwifery and they grow up to be psychologists continue that way of being because they need to learn the logos. They will say, oh no, you can't understand human problems. It's unconscious or irrational or subconscious, or if they're religious, the devil. So why do we not demand what's basic and the most basic obvious thing in religion and politics? Because a ban on words. Well, we can understand, hey, the nature of our soul is rational and understandable and objective. Everyone can understand the logos. In fact, that's why we are all here. That's the movement from religion, which is belief, to true spirituality, which is simply philosophy, which is simply the demand of this principle that we know applies to everything, applying it to our soul. Same thing for politics. Demanding this is the demand for the logos as the principles of ruling our world. So we're facing mass suffering in capitalism. We're facing the destruction of our planet because of capitalism. We're facing mass war and genocide because of the rule of religion in some places and the use of it to maintain oppression and control and slavery. So capitalism, fascism, there's a word for it when you're ruled by religion, same thing. All we need to do is demand this one principle, which is the most obvious thing in the world. So long as we put words on it, that's what we're doing. So, understanding human problems is what we're putting words on. The other part of the game, that's why we read Socrates. This part. So, neat. Back in. We do not recall the wordless pathologos, but we can reconstruct the conditions that brought it into being. The reconstruction is possible because the fragments of that past live within us as our problems. Ooh, problems are pieces of a puzzle. While the pathologos is a conclusion. Wow. What's conclusion? We already said. We already saw. Conclusion is this. Conclusion. Last stage of the dialectic. Interesting. So even in the creation of our pathologos, the dialectic was present. While the pathologos is a conclusion, we are only conscious of the fragment, since the parts necessary for its conclusion are wordless and therefore inaccessible. And when that is finally identified and put into words, it becomes obvious that the conclusion can't fit the reality we face, nor with what we most want to believe about ourselves. So it is for this reason we maintain that while the pathologos does not lack coherence, it does lack truth. So the difference is not whether it's unconscious or irrational, but the rationality behind our problems points to a false conclusion. There is such a thing as true and false. Now like we were saying, we recognize that when it comes to dentistry. There is such a thing as a false way of hammering into a child's face. Architects, there is a false way of wiring a house that will cause it to burn down. There is a false way of flying a plane or doing medicine. Beliefs can lead you to false conclusions. Understanding the rationality can lead you to the truth. That's the difference. We're applying that to religion and politics. So our problem and human, that would be how we function in the world as a result of this. But to make a happier, more just, beneficial, sustainable, rational, mature world. But also we're applying it to our human problems. Our human problems are rational. However, their conclusions point us to what's false about ourselves. There is a rationality behind the irrationality of our actions, you could say. As one gains an understanding of the past without the distortion of the pathologos, there is a corresponding recollection of one's true past rather than a recollection of the layers of beliefs about the past. Again, we're going through beliefs, removing beliefs for truth. Even the layers of beliefs that we use to misinterpret the past. And you can imagine this. Again, blow it up to society to get a metaphor that will help you remember it. Christopher Columbus, we're talking about Thanksgiving. Terrible, terrible person, murdered many people, did unspeakable things, committed a genocide. But the people who do not want to accept the truth about that are addressing the layers of false interpretation of beliefs to justify Christopher Columbus being an American hero. So they don't want people learning history. They don't want people talking about racism in schools. They are banning books. So that's a good metaphor. The fascists who are trying to ban education of truth and instead trying to promote their beliefs, their personal beliefs about America being number one. No one was ever racist in America. Jesus was a white American guy or whatever. They're stupid beliefs. That's them creating this false bridge of false beliefs. And so we are recollecting our layers of false belief about the past that mask us from knowing the truth of the true cause, the truth about Christopher Columbus, and for us, the truth about the origin scene. There is a distortions of one part, yes. To the degree one's life is dominated by the pathologos, there is a distortion of one's past. What has been accepted as memory of one's past is heavily interpreted through the pathologos. But is the transmission of the pathologos traumatic? Is it traumatic? Is it then buried in the unconscious? And if the traumatic scenes do not generate the pathologos, what does? Okay, this is another, so what we're doing here is addressing another false belief about the nature of human problems. It's always trauma. And because it's always trauma, another reason to say it can't be understood. It's unconscious or can't be remembered. Traumatic events of childhood are often so painful and anxiety-ridden that they are buried in the unconscious. But such events are not in themselves found to be productive of the pathologos. We do not find corporal punishment as a necessary factor in the formation of the pathologos. Now, corporal punishment is violence, hurting, abuse, physical abuse. Capital punishment is neither is good or beneficial or rational at any stage. Again, because we understand that everything is an opportunity to reflect on the nature of our pathologos. That's it. But what if people don't want to do it? Oh, you mean what if people have a block to the logos? That's what the pathologos is. That's the puzzle pieces. That's what we use. So simple when you say it. But what if those people are in power? Oh, that's the issue. What if they cut off your head? If you start to say, oh, we can actually understand problems. We don't have to hurt each other. Off with his head. Maybe it's time to reflect on the cause of why people demand that. Collectively as a species. So that the people who are playing out or the most addicted to their pathologos aren't ruling. Because they are the least qualified and the most harmful. It's a topsy-turvy world that we have without the logos. The reason punishment and violence do not produce a pathologos lies in the fact that if punishment is believed in any way to be justified, there is no need to draw an additional conclusion from it. Actually, it is not unusual for these pathologos learning scenes to have little or no action or drama in them. So, if you believe you deserved it in any way, you've already got the pathologos there. So what we're looking for is the unjust scene against ourselves, the insult to the self, that required us to come up with an additional conclusion in order to make sense of it. Of course, taking the blame, defending our images of our loved ones as being knowing. The benefit of the doubt, we called it earlier. Okay, sometimes there's little to no drama in them. In the pathologos scenes, origin scenes. The pathologos is a conclusion drawn from the scenes that allowed no other rationale. A pathologos can neither be created nor believed if there is any justification for an alternative judgment. It's the only way you can make sense of it. Unless, of course, you've been training in the logos and you realize that people are governed by their tyrannical ruler, and which means they are looking for opportunities to be a tyrant to others because they think that's what it means to be the best. Number 1, cosplaying a guru. If there are grounds for justifying some activity, then words can express it. Then it can be tolerated and understood even if it is not accepted as being just. For to tolerate the existence of something is to be conscious that it is tolerated. So even if you recognize it's something bad and wrong and stuff, you can put words on that it is bad and wrong. So if we are tolerating something, we've already put words on it, we've realized it's unjust, but we're tolerating it for some reason. And I got some spam, so how do I delete response? And how do I ban them? Add to block list. There we go. So, thanks for the anyone watching on Twitch. The one comment today was from a spam bot. Hopefully, in the future, more people can become interested in this kind of stuff. So, that's important. Trauma is not the cause of our problems. It's a very easy explanation, which is why it gains traction on Twitter and Twitch and social media platforms. Also, it's popular because it justifies the pathologos. What pathologos? It justifies the idea that you can't solve problems with rationality. It's the result of trauma. Therefore, give up. Or you can't recollect the origin scene because it was so traumatic. Not the case. Often there's very little drama or action in the scene. And if there is some sort of toleration of the violence, then you know that it's not a pathologos scene. You are seeing it as unjust. You're knowingly tolerating it. But if you're accepting the trauma, if there is any sort of justification for the traumatic scene, then you are already believing the pathologos. It's just a reiteration of what was already there. I deserve this because I stink. No. So, what does that mean? That means we have gained an understanding of the most popular ways of rejecting the quest we're on, that our problems are either irrational, unconscious, or unable to be remembered because of trauma. We can see how those things are not true. We can see how all of them work together in a little team because they are all unified by their rejection or blocking of the logos. And as a result, function, so dialectic, that's their definitions, that's how they demonstrate. So how do they divide up? How does that act in the world? Well, if they're all functioning to reject the logos, then they will all together function to maintain the pathologos. The idea that problems are irrational, problems are too emotional or traumatic to be recollected, or that they're unconscious, all of them together function to protect the pathologos of the person making those claims because they're rejecting the logos. That's how they function or demonstrate. So you can take this whole section and have fun arranging it with DDAS or DDAC. DDAC. We'll say DDDC. Definition, demonstration, division, and conclusion. Sometimes called DDAS because conclusion has analysis and synthesis in it. In other words, take this whole chapter and do the thing we've been practicing all day today. Can you have fun arranging it in the dialectical categories? So have fun with that, and that can become your understanding. You can share it with your friends, take that understanding and demonstrate it yourself. And then the more you do that, the more you're integrating it, and you'll see the world through that, which is a kind of learning and mastership that can not only benefit you and your friends, but is a kind of learning and mastership you can take with you into wherever we're going after this world. So therefore, you're reaching your destiny. Have fun doing that. And important that we see the significance of the wordless nature. That's what we've just finished reading and reviewing. The wordless transmission. Our problems are not irrational, unconscious, the devil, or unable to be understood because of emotional trauma. It's simply wordless. So what's our job here? Putting words on it. What's that called? Mastering the logos. How do we do that? The dialectic applied to our experiences. Sounds simple when you say it. So keep saying it. As Socrates says, if it's worth saying many times. So thanks for joining me today. The next time we're still in chapter 2, the big chapter. Blame and anger. What role does blame and anger have with our problems and with our ability to free ourselves from them? Lots of fun today. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time. And feel free to join on Twitch, YouTube, and on Discord if you want to get a notification when we go live. Thank you so much, and see you next time. Bye.